Today we are going to be comparing a few popular 2-microphone drum recording setups and just trying to answer the question which is best, or at least what's going to work best depending on the sound you are looking for. I think it's more and more common these days for people to be wanting to record a full drum set, but to not necessarily have the luxury of 4, 8, 16 different microphones. So the idea here is how can we best get a full picture of the drum set with just 2 mics. The mics I'm going to be using today are AKG 414 XLS, and I'm going to be using these condensers in the cardioid pattern. There is some polar pattern trickery I could do with figure 8 or omni, but I think what's most common is for folks to have cardioid condensers. So that's what I'm going to use today. Those are fairly expensive microphones, but I think you're gonna get really similar results even if you have less expensive mics. So we're gonna have a couple of stereo placements and then a couple of mono placements, depending on what kind of sound you're going for. And what I'm gonna do is explain each example, let you hear it, and then I will compare all of them back to back at the end. What I'm also going to do is I'll show you the dry audio, but I'm also going to mix each one, and I'm not going to mix them the same. I'm going to mix them separately because these different placements require different mixes to work properly. So some are gonna have slightly different EQ curves, some might be more compressed than others, and that's just part of it. So like I said, I'll explain each setup first, let you hear it, we'll compare all of them at the end, and then I'll probably check in with you from the computer. So the first setup we're gonna go with is a classic. It's the spaced pair, and this often gets used in multi-mic setups, but we're gonna see how well it does on its own today. And of course I have the 2 microphones spaced on either side of the kit, and then I have them both 40 inches away from the snare to keep it dead center in the stereo image and to try and avoid any potential phase issues. So let's hear what that sounds like. The next one we're going to try is the over-the-shoulder spaced pair. This is something that is not completely uncommon, but I don't see it that often, and I sort of stumbled on it on my own and really enjoyed the sound of it. And I don't have them set up right now, but I'm going to have the 2 mics just sort of over my shoulder and getting a similar sort of sound that I would get just sitting behind the drum set. And I'm going to also have the snare, kind of kick and snare, centered in that image, and I'm going to have them, again, probably about 40 inches away. So let's hear what that sounds like. So moving on to our mono placements, I'm going to start with one that seems fairly popular these days. I'm going to put one of the mics just dead overhead. I'm just gonna have a center overhead microphone. And then the other one is going to be in front of the kit, probably a little bit lower to catch some of the kick and the shells a little bit more. So it'll be like sort of a mono overhead in kind of a room, but sort of a close room mic. So here's what that is going to sound like. So the last setup is going to keep that center overhead, and then I'm going to move what was that microphone in front of the kit. I'm going to move that to be basically in the kit. This is going to be now in the worst position, or the fat mic position, or whatever you want to call it. It's going to be sort of below the ride, above the bass drum, sort of right in the middle of the toms. And so we're going to have this blend of like a very overall overhead picture of the kit and cymbals mixed with a microphone that is just like inside all the drums and gets a lot of like punchy attack and a lot of the shells. And again, we're still in cardioid, so I'm going to have that mic basically facing the snare drum, but kind of over the bass drum, and it's going to get a lot of the shells. So let's hear what that sounds like. Okay, here we are at the computer several days later. I have just listened through everything that you just heard, and I'm actually finding it harder to make a decision than I thought I would on what I like best. The biggest difference is definitely between the stereo and the mono placements. If you were listening on speakers or on headphones, I'm sure you noticed straight away there's a huge difference between when it goes mono and when it goes stereo. If you were listening on your phone, probably didn't really notice at all. But once they were all summed to mono in that last example there, where I took the stereo placements and I summed everything to mono, it became a lot more difficult for me to decide what was actually better. I thought some sounded a little drier, some sounded a little thicker, but it was hard for me to decide what was actually the best sound in my mind. I think what I actually preferred, what sounded the cleanest and the clearest to me, was the single overhead and then the front, like kind of close room mic, the sort of like just in front of the bass drum mic, which was surprising. I thought I would like the worst better, but I don't know, just in this example at least, I thought that the front mic sounded a little more clear, or the combination rather of the front mic and that single overhead. And I'm actually really digging having a single mono overhead, and I've been using that, if you saw in another video, I've been using that with a spaced pair, and then I've been adding a single overhead to capture just like dead center of the kit. And I think that's been a really cool sound and just like a very clear picture of the kit. So When it comes to deciding which placement is best, I'm fairly ambivalent. I think if I was recording for an actual song, I would go with a stereo placement, but if I was delivering to something like Instagram or something where it's going to sum to mono anyways, I would be fine using any of these. I think if anyone sent me any of these examples and said, can you work with these tracks, I'd say, yeah, totally. So I think it doesn't matter too much for me, but maybe you have stronger preferences. Maybe you heard things that I wasn't quite catching, so let me know in the comments. Hopefully this was helpful in some way. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.